Well, welcome to the Christian Business Luncheon. Thank you for coming. And I know we have at least one pastor here. Pat, will you raise your hand? Any other pastors here? Pat Ryan. And then how about the Christian Business Luncheon board? Anybody from the board, please raise your hand. If you have any questions, you can see any one of us. So we do not charge for lunches here at the or for any kind of entry fee for the Christian Business Luncheon. But if you would feel led to leave a donation on the little bowls of the table, would appreciate that to defray the cost of lunch. It's not mandatory, but if you would like to do that, we would sure appreciate that. I'd like to mention that our sponsorships are available for months. It's $150 to sponsor the luncheon for a month. And so we appreciate anybody that does that, and all the sponsors that we have, we appreciate them. Future speakers next month at the Church 137 will be Debbie Ronka. She's an author and coach and a really, really excellent speaker. And then in April, back here again, James Morrison, who's ex-FBI. He was a cybersecurity expert in the FBI, and he's now working with HP in the same role. He'll be excellent, and he will probably scare us a little bit in terms of what's going on the cyber world and what we need to be really concerned about. So now I'm going to have a former speaker, and happens to be Lee Ann's husband, Jim Nutt, come up and introduce her.
Good afternoon. I am Mr. Dr. Lee Ann Nutt. It's been just a couple of months ago, I was meeting a new administrator within the Lone Star College system where I work. I work at North Harris. And I was meeting this administrator for the first time, and she said, "Jim Nutt, are you related to Dr. Lee Ann Nutt?" And I said, "Yep." She paused a minute, cocked her head, and said, "Sweet gig." So I have started a few love notes with that moniker, "Dear Sweet Gig," since that occasion. I met Dr. Lee Ann Nutt when she was Lee Ann Nutt. It was 3 months removed from being a teenager, and I was 4 months away from being 28. And I met her on the campus of Texas Tech where I was a graduate student, and she had just finished her sophomore year. And she flashed that smile at me, and I was smitten. And after I spent one conversation with her, which was a substantive one, I knew this young woman is special. She is just flat special. And so when people come up to me, as many of you had today, which I always cherish, and tell me, "We just love your wife," and recount the reasons why, what she has done for that organization or that community, or even today, someone relayed to me the inspiration that she has been to this gentleman's daughter. I always think in my mind, I don't always say it, and say, "You're leaving off one detail." I say, "Well, what is that?" I saw her first. Yeah, I saw her first. So what I would like to say by way of introduction is that she is indeed special. And it's beyond the smile, and it's beyond that West Texas homegrown, what you see, what you get. Nobody's better than anybody else. Even the Myers-Briggs type indicator reveals that her combination of talent is pretty uncommon. It's a pretty rare mix that she has that makes her the presence that she is. What you see is what you get. She very much deeply cares about what she does. She's very, very passionate about students. and people in general, but specifically students' success. But she knows that that success in her current situation as president is driven by the success of their faculty and the administrators. She doesn't skip that. It's all about everybody, and herself included, growing and becoming more who we were meant to be in God's design, and then implementing that in our various opportunities in various, I'm going to check my notes here, in various activities. She's wearing a pin today that you'll see on her lapel, and it says, "I believe." Now, first time I saw it, I thought, cool. That's about her belief in Santa. I think she does believe in Santa, at least she tells me she does. But it's what is worn at Lone Star College Tomball. The culture that she is leading the change and the creation for, about the importance of what it is we believe as leaders of people, and especially in the field of education. So I know she's going to tell you some of her story today. I had someone tell me one time, a business mentor, said, "Jim, my dad taught me two things. Number one, nothing is ever, things are not always what they appear to be. Number one, things not always what they appear to be. Number two, things are never what they appear to be." And so she stands up here as Dr. Lee Ann Nutt, and you would not know unless she shared with you her background that brought her to where she is. Come on up, Lee Ann. I told you I wasn't going to surprise you, but I have a couple questions for you. Since we're not doing the traditional line-by-line vitae introduction, what is your favorite, most special, if you will, professional accomplishment?
That's a lob, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I think what he wants me to say, ooh, that's loud, Stephen. Sorry. Is I published a book about the importance of student beliefs and what we believe as administrators and teachers to impact our students. Is that the right answer?
I hadn't even thought of that.
Oh, okay.
That's better. That's better than I was thinking about. How long have you been president here?
Since 2011.
And before that, you were
2014. Before that, I was vice president of instruction, starting in 2011.
And before that, you were where?
North Central Texas College, up in Denton and Gainesville, Texas, north of Dallas.
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, the mother of my 16-year-old boy who just started driving, and our 13-year-old daughter, special needs, that some of you know and follow on Facebook, who has the greatest social life of anyone in the room. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Lee Ann Nutt.
Thank you. We were getting dressed this morning, and he said, "I promise I won't say anything to embarrass you. You can relax." So thank you. I never know what he's going to say. But yes, 30 terrific years together. I do want to share some of my story with you. I speak a lot, but I don't speak about myself a lot. And so the power of telling your own story, though, especially in a venue like this, and even into our students, I'll share some of my story because it's, as Jim said, it's easy, I think, for students, especially ours who face so much adversity, just to be here, can look and say, "Oh, she's the president. She, what has she been through? Can she relate?" So my story's just my story. Everybody's got a story. But what I want to do is share 3 stories, one from when I was a kid, my childhood, one as a mom, and one about coming to Lone Star College. Because all 3 of those stories woven together will reflect the work we're trying to do today and the people we're trying to be today and how we're trying to reflect all of God's grace and His promise in what we do, and being in a public government-based organization and walking that line of also being very clearly a believer and very overt in that. How do you walk that line? So those 3 stories will help share that, how I do that. I also want to recognize Roy Lazenby, who's in the room, because he's a good friend of mine. If you don't know Roy Lazenby, wave your hand. Everybody should know Roy. But if you're first time, you don't know Roy. Roy was the founding president of Lone Star College Tomball College many years ago, and Dave McGyver was on the board. But I'm going to steal Roy's line, because he'll say, Lee Ann Nutt, she was the best president except for me, or something like that. So Roy's a fantastic mentor and friend, and I appreciate you and Linda very, very much. Okay, so in 1979, so I'm going to start, you can start doing some math. I was 12 years old, and my beloved, beloved grandmother, who I called Nene, my mother's mother, passed away in May. And it was after a short but really ugly bout with some kind of cancer that just ate up her stomach and her it was just terrible. And losing Nene was significant because it was more like losing my own mother. When I was born, I spent most of my time with her. She was really the first one to hold me the first 6 weeks. My mother said, I was scared to death of you. It was Nene that I bonded with. And because my mom and my real dad divorced when I was 4 or 5 years old, I lived with Nene and Poppy and spent a lot of time there. So it wasn't just losing a grandmother, which is bad enough, but it was more like losing a mom. And to this day, I can't sing or hear How Great Thou Art, because as soon as the first notes come out, I'm right back sitting on the front row of the pew of the funeral. And so that was just a very, very deeply impactful experience as a young girl. But it didn't end there. What I couldn't have known as a 12-year-old girl was that Nene was the glue that was holding everything together. So what I thought was a picture-perfect life fell apart. And this is how it fell apart. So shortly after Nene passed away, my grandfather married a woman named Liz. You need to remember that name, because that's going to be significant in a minute. Wasn't a fan of Liz, not my favorite person, but Liz was significant in our life. My mother, though, after the death of her mother, faced her own demons. And I remember walking into our kitchen, perfect 1970s kitchen, mustard yellow cabinets, they were metal. Very clearly, even today, standing up here is 52 years old compared to a 12-year-old 40 years ago or so. Going into my mom and complaining about something my sister did. I don't even know what it was, but my mother, we had a double oven. She slammed the door. She was putting cinnamon toast in for breakfast, and she said, I can't take it anymore. Like, gee, she's having a really bad day. Went to school, didn't think anything about it. Came home from school, my stepdad was there, could tell, like, why are you home? Been crying. I didn't see my mother for over a year after that day. Didn't know where she was, didn't know why she left, didn't hear from her, didn't talk to her. So what is my preteen mind thinking? It's all my fault. And if I hadn't gone in and complained about my sister, there was no way I could have connected that the loss of her mother was impacting her, and this new woman coming in, and I had no idea that was going on. So my sister and I moved in with with Poppy and Liz. It was horrible, very difficult for everybody. My sister wound up moving in with her biological grandparents, so we're separated. So I've lost my mother, I've lost my sister. My stepdad at the time really is distant too. Don't have a relationship with my real dad, so it's a very lonely time. In about a year, my mom showed up again, was not the same person who left. She didn't look the same, she didn't act the same, she was probably more who she was for real then than what I had seen all this time. Liz, as I said, was not one of my favorite people. We clashed heads till the day she died, just less than a year ago. But Liz did something for me that changed my life. She's the one that introduced me and my sister, but mostly me, to a youth group at the Disciples of Christ Church in Borger, Texas. And we went to a youth camp. and went on retreats. And I found a group of friends that I didn't know at the time were going to be so instrumental to me for the rest of my high school growing up. Life was so difficult with Liz and Poppy and everything that was going on that once my mom did show up and kind of reconnected, I asked to live with her. So at 16, I moved to Amarillo and moved in with my mother. And we're ships that pass in the night. We live very different lives. I never really see her. She's a bartender during the day, and who knows what she was doing at night, but she didn't leave the bar. We lived off tips. I got a job, went to work, and basically became self-sufficient by the time I was 16. So I learned very much then, just work hard, don't rock the boat, conflict's bad. All the lessons I took from that were good. But I knew in that time that higher education was my out. That if I could get to college, I could live a very different life. Because the life I was living with my mother at the time was one that included a whole lot of alcohol, a whole lot of men, a whole lot of moves to different apartments, and it just was not, I couldn't say it then, but I knew that was not normal. That's not the way you raise children. But by meeting through Liz and getting connected in this youth group, I found a family who just wrapped their arms around me. Judy Reet, to this day, is one of my very, very best friends. Her mother just died recently, and they were my family. I spent more time with them than I did at home. God used Liz, a woman that I clashed heads with for decades, to create a path for me that I wouldn't have had. And it was that family that wrapped their arms around me and kept me protected. I've also always felt like, and not until I started going to that youth group, but since that youth group and learning that God's a relationship and learning that God loves you, that I felt like God had like a dad, had his hand on my head and would just guide me. Yeah, Lee Ann, you don't want to go over there. What are you doing? Nope, come back over here. And just had a hedge of protection like a father would. And that's significant for me because my mom has been married 5 times. And those are just the men she married. My grandfather, Poppy, I've referred to him a couple of times, is the only, until meeting Jim Nutt, the only male consistent figure I've had in my world that would teach you what a father's love is supposed to feel like. So for me to be able to say I felt God's love and protection and presence and his hand on my head like he was just guiding me is huge for me. I want you to know that today my mother and I are closer than we have ever been. Forgiveness is powerful. We forgave each other years ago. And when I quit expecting her to be the mom that I thought I deserved and just learned to accept and love my mother for all of her faults and her challenges, then our relationship just got so deep. So I speak about my mother and you think, oh my goodness, this horrible woman. She's a heart of gold. She's one of the most forgiving women, the least judgmental women I've ever met in my life. So I learned from that people typically are only doing the best they can. And sometimes that's not very good. But people are only doing the best they can. And when you have grace and forgiveness and acceptance and love towards somebody, those relationships can be healed and mended. It's no doubt she's living consequences of her choices. She's financially insecure. My sister and I take care of her financially. Her health is failing. she's in a hard place. But I'm so grateful that she and I have the relationship where I can help her now. Learning that, going through that whole experience helped me see how much our students need somebody to believe in them, to show them grace and kindness and forgiveness and inclusion. And so that experience, had I not had it, I don't think would have, I'll say it this way, that experience helps me be a better mom, a better daughter, and a better president. Second story. So let's fast forward to 2000, and Rachel was born in 2004. So we were married 14 years before we decided, this keeps cutting out, before we'd have kids. That was an anniversary to remember because we found out we were having Michael, who's 16 now, on our 14th wedding anniversary. We sat in total silence. I don't think we said anything to each other that night. Just sitting there, and it wasn't a total surprise. We said, well, if it happens, it happens. That's a whole other story, but we're not gonna, whatever. So we find out, thinking it's gonna take a while, we find out we're having Michael. And the only thing I remember saying that anniversary dinner was, we're eating, and I looked up and I said, you have to pull the teeth. I can't do that. I can't pull teeth. I was so worried about teeth being pulled. That's all I can remember about that anniversary dinner. And I don't think I've maybe pulled one tooth. I just can't do that. That just freaks me out. So we have Michael. We have one kid. How much harder can two be? Oh my goodness, exponentially harder, right? It's not just double, it's exponential. Well, because I was an older mom, so I was 35, 37. I'm not tracking on my dates. I was considered a high-risk pregnancy. So we were asked, do you want to have the genetic testing? Nope, doesn't matter, not going to do that. But because we thought we miscarried, I was having sonograms all the time and being high-risk pregnancy, over and over, sonogram after sonogram. Everything was fine until June of 2004. It was a Friday morning. We were going into a routine checkup. No big deal, had a long list of to-dos that afternoon, get this done, move on to the next thing. We go in for our checkup, and they start doing the heartbeat thing, start looking, and they couldn't find it. That was the longest, it was probably 30 seconds, but it was the longest period of time. And I'm starting to get a little antsy, and I'm watching the nurse practitioner's face. She finally finds it. And how many have heard that baby heartbeat? You know what it sounds like, what it's supposed to sound like. This didn't sound anything like that. And for a quick second, I saw something flash across the nurse practitioner's face. And I knew something's wrong. No, everything's fine. It's no big deal. Probably nothing, but let's just go do another sonogram, just to check. Okay, we've had 42 of them by now, so let's go do another one. The doctor comes in. It's probably nothing, but we want you to go see a fetal maternal specialist. Okay, when do we need to have that appointment? They're waiting for you. You'll be there in about an hour. But it's nothing. Not to worry. We drive to downtown Dallas, meet with this guy. John Rosnes was his name. And he's got this fancy sonogram. It was impressive. We heard that same abnormal sound and saw it on the screen. I don't know, doctor, not a real doctor, but I knew when I looked at that, that's not right. And he said, your baby looks like we didn't know it was a she, looks like has 3 chambers instead of 4 in her heart. And this kind of defect, Stephen, I keep losing this kind of defect is highly correlated with Down syndrome. Well, we went from life is great to heart defect and Down syndrome. I was laying on the table, and ladies, men, this might make you uncomfortable, but I was laying on the table. I was not a pretty pregnant. I was pregnant everywhere. My fingers, my toes, I was just this beached whale on this table. And the doctor left the room, and I remember crying. Thank you. And Jim Nutt said the most wise thing I'd ever heard him say. And he's a really smart guy. I said, "What do we do now?" And he said, "Whatever's next." In life's moments that are so surprising and so hard and so unanticipated challenge, sometimes you don't know what's next. But what's next always shows up. So what's next for us with Rachel became doctor's appointments over and over and over again, weekly, until she was born. And one of those doctor's appointments was to have an amniocentesis done. After we went to the maternal fetal specialist and he told us this news, he said, "But I want you to see a pediatric cardiologist just to confirm." "Okay, when do we need to do that?" "You've got an appointment in an hour." So we went from there to her. She did an hour-long 4D sonogram thing. And she was the one who said, because I was holding on to the odds, he didn't say all babies have Down syndrome who have this defect. I was holding on to those odds. And she said, "No, but 2 of 3 have Down syndrome." She still didn't say all of them. We left there and just doing whatever's next. Whatever's next, we decided to do the amniocentesis to confirm that, in fact, Rachel did have a genetic defect. A friend of mine, a good friend of mine, pushed hard on me on why I wanted to have that test. "Lee Ann, it's not going to change anything." "I know." "Why do you want to do that and take that risk?" "I know there's a risk. I just don't understand why you would do that." I said, "Let me tell you why I'm going to do this." God gave me an opportunity to know before she was born. The abnormal sound of her heart was not related to her defect whatsoever. The cardiologist said, "That's a red herring. That was you could have caught that any day." But if we had not heard that funky sound, we wouldn't have had the time between 30 weeks and 38 weeks to process everything that was happening with our baby. I said, God gave me an opportunity to find out because he knows me. And he knows that over the next 8 weeks, I'm going to learn everything I can, do everything I can, and I'm even going to grieve and cry and scream and cuss and be mad and why us and I don't want this for 8 weeks. Because when the 8 weeks are over, it's not about me anymore. It's about that little girl. What next for us became the day we took her to have open heart surgery at 4 months old, 10 pounds, exactly what the doctor said we needed to get to. What's next became bathe her in iodine, dry her off, don't let her eat. What's next became get in the car, start the car, drive the car, park the car, open the car door, get out of the car. Our life for me, that became just all I could do was exactly what is next. The moment that we had to hand her over to the nurse to take her back for her open heart surgery was probably the most terrifying moment in my entire life. Because cognitively, no, we have to do this. She will not survive if we don't do this surgery. But that moment of holding her and giving her over, there was also a great amount of peace. This is what we have to do. throughout those 8 weeks, God gave us lots of peaceful moments. One, I remember we were I just wanted to escape from this whole reality that we had going on with Down syndrome and heart surgery and all of this stuff. So I took our then 2-year-old Michael to the bookstore, Barnes & Noble. We called it the train store because they had the little trains in the back and he wanted to play. And I'm like, great, we'll go to the train store. They always have displays of new books. And we walked in and I see this book, didn't know what it was about, grabbed it, went and sat down to take a look at it while he was playing with trains. And it's called The Memory Keeper's Daughter. Don't know if you've read it. Guess what it was about? Down syndrome. Had no idea that that's what that book was about. I'm like, really, God? I wanted an escape. I didn't want to read about Down syndrome, but it was a fabulous book. Went to take Michael to the doctor and walked into the exam room, and there's a calendar on the wall, and it's from the Down Syndrome Association of Dallas. Don't know if it was in every exam room, but it was in our exam room. And looking at those pictures was a message of, it's okay. It's going to be okay. Those moments of just undescribable peace happened repeatedly during this time. The most powerful one was when I woke up at 4 a.m. sobbing, just uncontrollably, with this overwhelming urge to look up baby names. And we'd already chosen the name Rachel Ann for other reasons. So I get online and I type in Rachel Ann to the first website that pops up. And I read the words for Rachel Ann, innocent lamb, full of grace. Y'all, I can't even tell you the peace that came in that. And it was a message of, I've got this. It's okay. So I typed in Michael Lee, our son's name, and we had been listening to the Casting Crowns song about Sheltered in the Storm, and it was just real powerful for us at that time. I typed in Michael Lee, and it said, like God, sheltered from the storm. Because I was so afraid of the impact of her health concerns and all the attention and all of the time and energy she was going to take. How do we have time and energy for our son? Can we do that? Can we do both? In that moment, I knew it's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. Now, one more quick story about her. Should have been just a real precursor to how she is today at 13 years old. She's awesome and so much fun and so full of joy and loves unconditionally like nobody I've ever known. She decided we needed her to be born on a certain day at a certain time at a certain hospital because in addition to the major heart defect, her aorta had stenosis of the aorta. And if she didn't have the medical care she needed at birth, and the way our anatomy works, her life was at risk. So the plan was to induce labor at this hospital, do all this stuff. I want you to picture for a second that you're in a den with about, 10-foot ceiling, and we decide to replace the ceiling fan. And you've got a ladder and ceiling fan parts all over the living room. And you're standing on that ladder, and your wife says, I don't feel so good. So Jim Nutt's trying to get the ceiling fan done. I'm going to go lay down. This was at 4 o'clock to, we need to call the doctor to, we got to go now because we're supposed to drive to Dallas, to, I can't get off the floor, to call the ambulance, to Rachel being born an hour later. It went just like that.
Ceiling fan never worked.
Yeah, it almost caught on fire. He's like, I just got to get the ceiling fan done. Almost caught on fire. Anyway, they rush us to a hospital across the highway from us, very, very close. And nobody believes me. The ambulance guys don't believe me. The nurse doesn't believe me. I'm like, this baby is coming. And nobody believed me. I don't know. I'm the mom. I know, right? What I didn't know while I was delivering her, just like that, is that there is mass chaos at the nursing station because Jim's trying to explain to them her heart condition. And we've got to be at Children's Hospital in Dallas for all these reasons, and it was just chaos. Of course, I didn't know that at the time. They're trying to send her to another hospital in downtown Dallas that we did not want to go to. Come to find out, so I'd been keeping a notebook of all Rachel's doctor's appointments and all. Jim had brought that. Nursing staff called the second doctor on call, the second pediatrician on call. Not the first one didn't answer. It was the second one. And the second one was a doctor in our office, our pediatrician's office. So he knew us. Thank goodness the first doctor wasn't there. He walked into me, said, Lee Ann, there's a problem. And I looked at David Goff and I said, she's got complete AV canal defect, stenosis of the aorta, get her to Children's, a hospital in Dallas. He said, I'm on it. He went out and started barking orders to the nurses, and before we knew it, Care Flight was there, and it was like Top Gun, and it was just everybody was about getting Rachel to the hospital. God's story was throughout that entire experience for us. And so in those moments now when we think we're having a really bad day or something unexpected happens or there's adversity or a challenge, try to reflect on that and go, yeah, he's got this all the time, all the time. Finally, one quick final story. Coming here is really significant. Moving to Tomball has had impact on our family like we could have never predicted. I want to tell you just quickly how we got here. We didn't want to come here, frankly. I've said, Houston? Nah, not interested. Tomball? Love Tomball. This move has been amazing. So let me tell you that story real quick. It was November 2010. My phone rings in my office. I'm vice president of instruction at North Central Texas College. I answer the phone, and it's a recruiter, which I've never gotten a call from a recruiter before. He said, my name's John. We're looking for a vice president of instruction at Lone Star College. Tomball, your name came up. I didn't say it out loud, but in my head I thought, no, it didn't. You're just going through the directory. You got to the ends, and you called me. That is how that works, right? So I said, well, where? He said, Lone Star College. Like, yeah, not interested. We're not looking to move. We love it here. Everything's fine. Not interested. December, a couple of weeks later, I'm in Louisville, Kentucky. It's late. It's rainy. It's cold. Traveling with a couple of colleagues, and we get to the Louisville airport. There's no cabs. I notice a man and a woman who are traveling. I hear the man say the same hotel that we're going to. So when a cab does show up, it's a minivan, and being who I am, I was like, hey, you want to share a ride? We're going to the same place. He said, sure. I wind up in the back of this car. This sounds terrible if you don't know the whole context. I find her in the back seat with this guy. And face to face, and I said, my name's Lee Ann, what's your name? Well, he was Austin Lane. He was the president at Lone Star College, Montgomery. And he said, Tomball's looking for a vice president. You need to apply for that job. Louisville, Kentucky in December. I'm like, that's interesting. He keeps trying to recruit me. And so in that process, he mentions he's trying to hire somebody from the community college in Waco. Well, Waco was on our list of places we'd be willing to go. So I had an ulterior motive. I'm like, well, if she goes to there, then Waco's open, then maybe we could go to Waco. So I called him in January and said, hey, did you hire her? Because I really am fishing not about Lone Star, I'm fishing to find out what's going on at Waco. He said, yes, please apply for the job. Like, that's 3 times. So I talked to Jim. He said, call the recruiter back. It's just a conversation. So I called the recruiter back. He totally blew me off. I said, I'm Lee Ann Nutt calling about the job. He said, oh, yeah, they've already got finalists. They're already too far in the process. I said, yeah, I thought so, but I just wanted to check. Austin Lane suggested that I look at the job. He said, wait a minute. What's your name? I said, Lee Ann Nutt. He said, just a minute. And I heard him get on his computer and type. He said, oh, I remember you now. You need to apply for that job. Well, dang, I don't want to go to Houston, right? So Jim said, well, let's just send it in. You're just sending it in your application. You don't have to go. Y'all, I could have not gotten this job. I could have it just was so far beyond our control. It was so meant to be here. A little bit of context around that time. That period of time when all of that was going on was probably our most difficult in our 30 years, financially and relationship-wise, because of the finances. It was to move. We had 2 houses that we'd have to sell in the housing bubble. Selling 2 houses was going to be impossible. We didn't have any money. Jim had a business that grew really, really fast, and we didn't invest in a really, really good CPA. So we found ourselves owing the IRS over $100,000. So what do you do with that? What we did with that was just lock arms and say, whatever's next, God's got this, and we're just going to listen and obey. So fast forward through a really long set of circumstances. There was a moment with our attorney and she said, you know, Lee Ann's got enough in her retirement account, she could pay off that tax bill. Well, let's take it, do it, let's do that. Except Texas law doesn't let you do that. So we were fighting all sorts of ways. So I get a call, because I just got the job here, all of this is going on. We're living out of just change in jars that we can find. And from a random list of names, I call a financial advisor from Valak. That's where my stuff is with. And I wasn't very nice to her. She answered the phone. I said, I don't need your help. I just need a name. I need to know the attorneys. I need a number to the attorneys at Valak. That's all I want. And I was just real gritchy with her. And thank goodness, Josie said, let me help you. What's going on? Josie's a believer. Josie's mission is to help people achieve what they need to achieve and navigate those kind of circumstances. Josie, over the next 18 months, navigated Valak for us. She didn't have to do that. Y'all, I was really ugly to her. I just confess that right now. But she heard something in my voice and knew this is my calling. This is what I'm supposed to do. Let me help you. 18 months later, I get a call from Josie. She said, we're about to make a phone call. Just say what I tell you to say. Yes, ma'am. I have her. I'm fully on board. We got to talk to who we needed to talk to in Valak. The only reason Valak released the retirement funds to pay the tax bill is because we moved to Lone Star College. God knew before I knew in that November that we needed to move. And I fought it over and over again. Nope, not going to Houston. Nope, not going there. Nope, not going there. And finally, you get the 2x4 against your head and you're like, okay, maybe I'm supposed to look at this, but I didn't know why. That's part of the reason why. And God had it all along. And He's making paths for us even when we don't know that we need a different path. So thank goodness He did that. Since then, there's story after story after story about the move here and the impact it's had on Rachel and Michael and Jim's employment. He's worked with Lone Star College now for 8 years or so, and the difference it's made in our family. So we love this community. We are called to this community. We are supposed to be here. And that informs how I do my job every single day as president. Learning as a kid, all the lessons I learned by being independent so young and fighting all of those battles and those challenges and seeing for our own students, their own adversity and what they're going through. I get it. You're wanting to change your life, and you see college as a way to do that. To trust in God and our whole experience with Rachel in adversity, and then being obedient so that He can bless us. So when I come to work every day as president at Lone Star College, Tomball, it's not just a job. It's an awesome job. I've got the best job in the world. But it's my mission. It's my calling. This college is the mission field for me. And so it's just an honor to get to serve this community and be part of this amazing community and make a difference in the lives of our students all the time. So thank you for letting me share my story very much. I appreciate it. Any questions or anything I said that you're like, what did she mean by that? Or want to know? Okay. I stunned them all to silence, Paul. Okay, Paul's got one. Thank you. Okay. Thank you very much. Thanks. One word, one back. Thank you all very, very much. Thank you, Paul.
Ask anybody here who likes to be alone, come here next month. Second Tuesday month, come here. If you like being with the people, please come to Church 137. Look forward to seeing you there, and thank you for coming today and braving the rain. Thanks again, Lee Ann. And Jim.